What's up, everybody? My name is Malik Atala, and today is episode 2 of my Charles Manson series. We left off when Manson's bid of doing 7 years at Terminal Island Prison was up. He was reluctant to go back out in society. Prison was the only home he'd ever really known, and he told the prison, "Don't let me out, I can't handle them maniacs on the outside," which is kind of ironic considering his history. He was completely institutionalized all his life and never lasted long without getting in trouble. His rap sheet included pimping, robbing stores, stealing cars, cashing fake checks, etc. I forgot to mention that a little kid came up to him in McNeil Island and asked, "Will you teach me how to speak English?" Manson said, "No, you're too stupid. Let's play some handball." So he taught the kid how to play handball and speak English and tell the truth, so that he'll never lie to anyone. He lives in Peru, Manson claimed. When Manson learned he was being paroled in March of 1967, he told the prison again, "If you let me out, I think I'll be doing the same thing or something more." He's being honest in that one moment, but the prison's already crowded and he gets paroled. In 1967, the Peace and Love movement in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury was prevalent. Thousands of flower children were up and down the streets, dropping acid, listening to music, and preaching peace. It was in this atmosphere that the 35-year-old ex-convict Charles Manson would get out of prison at Terminal Island. He dropped his prison clothes and traded them for a guitar and sandals. He then headed to the eye of the storm. He was picked up on Pacific Coast Highway with his bags by Harold True. Charlie then headed to Haight-Ashbury. The evidence is that he was very charming. The kids seemed to just gravitate towards him. He was surrounded by this new culture he had never known. He once went up to a kid and he got offered an acid peel. He asked what it was, and the kid said, "This makes the colors go." He said, "Oh, I heard about those things." Charlie knew if he played his guitar and acted like a guru to sing and preach in a place like that, you could get followers in no time. Manson was looking for girls that would take care of him. He knew how to use and manipulate others to his advantage. The public came to know Manson as a very institutionalized person, used to being told what to do, and was far more comfortable in a confined, isolated setting. He was an antisocial personality that did not fear any type of punishment, and that is what made him very dangerous. Quote by Manson, "If someone beats you with a whip, and you love the whip, what's he doing? He's making a fool out of himself. It's heaven right here, Jack, right here." Powerful, malevolent figure. He picked up from his childhood and time in prison how to size up people and adapt to his environment very quickly. He spent his time in prison writing countless songs about human behavior, which was quite revolutionary at the time. He gathered a group of followers in no time when he sang and he played his guitar in front of all the dropout kids. Some of them found what they were looking for and saw something in him. He was very charismatic and intelligent. One of his first friends and followers he picked up was a librarian named Mary Bruner. She was a hot blonde with a PhD from University of Wisconsin. She also was a musician and met Charlie Manson coming out of her place of employment when he came up rapping and talking to her about all of his stuff, and entranced her. She let him move into her apartment and they became lovers after several weeks. She had come from the Midwest and, like a lot of broken kids, came for the summer of love. She was the first girl to join up with him. Manson was astonished by the crowd in Haight-Ashbury, and he once, in a 1986 interview with Charlie Rose, said that he questioned a kid and asked, "Where do you eat?" He said, "Oh, I go down to the Diggers," and they pass out food. He said, "Well, where do you get the money? Do you have a job?" And he said, "Nah, man, I just get by." "Well, where do you sleep?" "I sleep in the park." "Well, how do you do that?" Manson asked. The kid said, "A sleeping bag." Manson looked and walked around and said this was love here. This is love here, the environment. He grew up in that alley and had been a street person all of his life. He was very determined to tell the kids the truth about how things really were. Because they were lost, came from broken homes. Quote, how do you feel that an ex-con can get out of prison and find rocket scientist children out in the street? Go home. I can't. My parents won't let me. They're drunks. They hate me. He came on so strong to these middle-class kids that he instantly converted them to his philosophy of thinking and views on life. Another example of Charlie in Haight-Ashbury was a girl came up to him and gave him a flower and said, love. Manson thought, ooh, something's going on here. He was straight out of prison. It was a brand new culture than he was used to, so he grabbed onto it and ran with it. The second time, the second of his followers was Lynette Fromm, nicknamed Squeaky later by George Spahn, who always pinched her and she would squeak, but that's coming later. Lynette's childhood was overshadowed by her parents' poor relationship. She was quite quiet and sensitive while growing up in post-war suburbia on the outskirts of Hollywood. She had talents in school for dancing, drama, and poetry. She was voted in junior high as personality plus or something to that effect. She dated a guy named Bill Siddons, who would go on to manage the Doors. The media culture and celebrity culture was familiar to her as just a part of growing up. Although she was talented, she was also troubled. At 13 years old, her own father, the rocket scientist I mentioned earlier, ignored her completely, which made her very confused and heartbroken. She could never talk to him. She was just completely cut off from her father while they were living under the same roof. That was probably the root of her pain. As a senior at Redondo High, her attendance was sporadic, and one day at work, she shot up her arm with a staple gun and didn't even flinch. Other of her workers saw that. An act perpetrated by her pent-up emotions. At 19, she dropped out of El Camino College. She was sitting on a curb in Venice, California, and her parents had thrown her out. And then this bus drove up. Manson got out, looked at her, and said, your parents threw you out, didn't they? She felt he was a miracle man and felt like it was her fate to go with him. She thought he was a genius. She asked, how did you know that? He invited her to come along with him, and he waited for her to answer, to make up her mind. She grabbed all of her bags and got into his bus and never came back. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.